Well, it's a really hot day here in Nashik and I have a hot car for you. This is the car that I've been driving for the day. This is the top spec model which in its entirety will be called as the Mahindra XUV 3XO A7XL. Yes, I know that sounds like a randomly generated password, but this car is not random. And what Mahindra is trying to do is not random at all. It's a straightforward approach. They're trying to give you a compact SUV which does not compromise on safety, on feature list, and on looks. We'll get to it. There's a lot to talk about the car. Let's start off right away. Now, before I start taking a closer look at the design of the 3XO, there's something I want to share. You see, taking a look at our YouTube statistics, we found out that a lot of you people do watch our videos, but you're still not subscribing. Please change that. Please consider subscribing to the autoX YouTube channel. Hit the like button, comment down below. I'll try to reply to most of them as much as I can. And also share this video with your friends and hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss our future uploads. I mean, really, do consider subscribing. It really makes our day. Now let's take a closer look at the design of the car. Well, having tracked your feedback on our social media handles, it's clear that this car divides opinions. If you like it or not, do let us know in the comment section. I'm really looking forward to what is the reaction to this design of the Mahindra's cars. But if you take a closer look, well, what stands out is this large gloss panel up here at the front. Gives this car a bit of an EV vibe. And of course, the headlamp cluster with the C-shaped LED DRL. Now, the face, as angular as it is, with the sharp creases on the bonnet, making it look angry, well, it's similar to Mahindra's BE range of electric vehicles, the concepts that they have unveiled earlier, and we finally see what they can come down to in the production guise. Coming to the side profile, well, it's largely similar to the Mahindra XUV 300, the car that it replaces. It is, after all, a facelift, but it's a very thorough one. Is it an all-new model? Does it feel like one? Well, that's a question we'll get to in a bit. But as for the side profile, it looks very similar. I really like how they have slashed through the plastic cladding up over the wheel arch. And speaking of plastic cladding, well, you have a lot of it all around the car. What I also like is the 17-inch alloy wheels on the car, at least on the top spec model. I think this gives the car a sporty look. But now let's come to the rear end design, and this is where the highlight of the car is, perhaps, because it again gets perhaps the biggest automotive industry trend in Indian market right now, which is the connected tail lamp design, LEDs of course. What's changed is that the registration plate has been shifted down to the bumper now, and on the sides of the bumper you see a lot of detailing as well. All in all, I think the car really does stand out. It does hold your attention the moment you look at it, and I think if you're someone who's looking for that in your new car, this one will fit that bill. Now coming to the interiors, well, it seems like a familiar affair. We've seen a similar treatment in the Mahindra XUV range before. I'm talking about the XUV 400, which was the XUV 300's electric version. And that treatment has been stepped up, I would say several notches up here in the cabin of the 3XO. Taking a closer look, what I like is the use of soft touch materials up on the dash. There's also this stitching which gives it a premium touch, and you have this gloss black element running on the dash with these nice diamond shaped inserts as well, and I think that is a very nice touch. Of course, you have a big screen sitting up on top of the dash over here. This comes with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay support as well, and the touch response is pretty good. The graphics are crisp, the touch response is nice, and overall it's a nice experience to use this touchscreen infotainment system. Below it, however, is a set of buttons, and it is something that does not necessarily look the most futuristic one out there. However, having said that, since they are big physical buttons, they have really high ease of use, and I really like that. Coming to the steering wheel, well, it gets these gloss black elements a lot of physical buttons over here as well. And while it looks nice, keeping them smudge free, well, that's going to be a bit of a task. We of course get a fully digital instrument cluster as well, pretty large in size, and it also shows navigation up here if you use the inbuilt navigation system, which I think can be helpful on those long rides. Ergonomics are on point. The steering is adjustable for height but not for reach. The seat is adjustable for height as well, so you can pretty much find your sweet spot here in the ergonomics department. One of the things that I do want to mention is that this gets a really bright theme in the lower half of the cabin, at least, also on the seats. And it's just been a day that we've spent. Now of course we take it to some rough places where you're seeing the car, so there's a lot of dirt flying around, but already the car has started to show those stains. So I am not too sure how this will translate into usage a couple of years down the line and how easy to maintain it will be. We all know that bright cabins look really nice, but maintaining them, well, that is something you have to be careful about. The Mahindra XUV 3XO also gets a big jump in the features list as mentioned before. You get things like the 10.25-inch infotainment screen as you've just seen, and of course a digital instrument cluster for the driver as well. On top of that, Mahindra has brought in a dual zone climate control system to the segment as well, and the top spec models will get all LED lighting, a 7-speaker Harman Kardon audio system with a 380-watt amplifier, and of course Mahindra being Mahindra, this also has been fitted with the Adrenox in-car connectivity system as well. Additionally, you get a 65-watt Type-C charging port at the front, a wireless charger, rear AC vents, and a rear Type-C charger as well. Now coming to the rear seat experience, well, I think this is where the 3XO really shines across its segment that it's competing in, because there's a lot of space available here. Now if you've seen our first impressions video, the walk around from the launch, you would have seen how my reaction was when I first sat into the car, because this cabin is really comfortable and you immediately notice it the moment you sit down. To give you an idea of space, I've set the driver's seat as per my preference. For reference, I'm 5'10", and you can see I have loads of knee room on offer. I can stretch my legs under the seat. The under thigh support is decent, and overall the cushioning is really nice as well. Of course, I have a drop down armrest with cup holders in there as well, and all 3 passengers, if you were to seat them, they will get 3-point seat belts. And what's really nice is that the seats actually get load sensors as well, so you don't always have to keep the seat belt buckled in. I'm looking at you, Maruti Suzuki. But speaking of having 3 people seated here, well, if you really do wish to do so, that will not be a problem. Mahindra is claiming the widest cabin experience here at the rear seat, and of course I'll have to test that by sitting back to back in all other cars, but in first impressions I don't doubt them at all, because I can actually imagine having 3 people sit here. It will be a bit of a squeeze, but it shouldn't be a problem for short commutes. Last but not the least, the Mahindra XUV 3XO comes with a massive sunroof. Now again, they claim this is the largest in the segment, and I can see why they are so proud of the sunroof. This is very big in size and really adds to the sense of space inside the cabin. Mahindra has also upped the safety quotient, because the XUV 3XO now comes with 6 airbags, rear disc brakes and ESP from the Mahindra XUV 700, along with ISOFIX anchors on all variants. Higher spec models will also get features like the electronic parking brake with auto hold, hill start, hill descent assist, a 360-degree camera, blind spot monitor, and of course the big highlight is the addition of ADAS. Now keep in mind, this is level 2 ADAS that has been borrowed from the XUV 700 and brought down to the XUV 3XO, making it the first car in the segment to get level 2 ADAS features. Of course, cars like the Kia Sonet and the Hyundai Venue come with ADAS tech as well, but keep in mind they are level 1 and based only on cameras. Coming to the boot space, well, you get 295 liters of capacity, and Of course, you get 60-40 split seats here, so you can fold them down and make more space if you need to. You get these really nice hooks as well. But what's interesting really is that Mahindra has said that 295-litre boot space capacity might not seem really high in the first glance, but they say that they have measured it up until the height of the seat and not all the way through, because they say while theoretically you can stack them all up right here at the top and it would give them a bigger figure to boast, but there's no point because the baggage would then just fall on the rear seat passengers. So I think that's a good practice that they're measuring the boot space how it should be measured. So keep that in mind when you see the boot space figure on the brochure. Well, now let's talk about the engine options, and that also brings me to the variant distribution of the XUV 3XO. And I want to make a special mention about the variant distribution because in this case, they have been trimmed down as compared to the XUV 300. And I think that's a really good practice, because if you were to take a look at some of the newer cars that have been launched recently, even the cars that compare or have a similar price like the XUV 3XO, the number of drivetrain options and the variant combinations that you can choose from is insane. I mean, it can get really confusing, but in the case of the 3XO, well, thankfully, it's not that much. And with that, let's talk about the drivetrain options. You have 3 engine options that you can choose from on the XUV 3XO, starting with the tried and tested 1.2-litre turbocharged petrol engine, which makes 110 horsepower. That can be had with either a 6-speed manual gearbox or a 6-speed torque converter automatic gearbox. Then you also have the 1.5-litre diesel engine, which interestingly is available with almost all variant options and can be had with a 6-speed manual gearbox or a 6-speed AMT gearbox. Finally, there's the 1.2-litre direct injection turbocharged petrol engine, which makes a massive 130 horsepower, making it one of the most powerful cars that you can buy this side of 20 lakh rupees. I think that's really interesting, and this engine can be had again with either a 6-speed manual gearbox or a new 6-speed torque converter automatic gearbox, and that is the combination that we'll be driving today. Well, now it's time to talk about the driving experience of the 3XO. And the moment you start driving it, there are 2 things that you notice immediately. And the first thing is actually not performance. Surprise, surprise. It's actually the NVH levels of the cabin. And what I mean by that is just how quiet it is here inside the cabin. It's a really soothing experience. The only thing as a result that you need to keep in mind is that the tire noise, the road noise is a lot more noticeable. So you might think that maybe you're driving wrong pressures. I mean, it happened to me, but you're not, and you realize it's just because the cabin is a really, really quiet place, and I really like that. The second thing, of course, well, is performance. With 130 horsepower under the hood, this is a properly fast car. Now, of course, you get 3 drive modes on the 3XO: zip, zap, zoom, as always. And in case you need a refresher, zoom is the fastest one, zip is the most calm state of tune, and zap is the middle ground. Now, one of the things that I like is that depending on the driving mode you have chosen, not only it is the drivetrain that becomes more or less eager, but it's also the steering wheel, which also weighs up quite a lot, especially in the zoom mode, which is the quickest mode on the 3XO. On the other hand, in the zip mode, you get a really light steering feel. So I would say it's the best of both worlds. However, sensitivity is one aspect. We also have to talk about the feedback, and the feedback from the steering wheel is decent at best. One of the things to note is that when you eventually do slow down and find yourself in tight driving conditions like I am, you will have a lot of beeps and dings coming from the car, because the 3XO comes with level 2 ADAS, like I mentioned before. So there are a host of sensors and everything in place to tell you exactly where your car is, just how far away it is from an obstacle. And while it is a highly recommended safety system, well, we've not driven it so extensively, the car today, that we can tell you how effective it is in different driving conditions. But the first impressions, of course, are positive, except for the beeps and dings. I think you can turn them off, but I just can't be bothered to do that today. Now, Mahindra say they have worked really hard on the suspension technology, and here, where we have some really big rumble strips, the XUV 3XO has been able to handle itself well. I mean, until unless you hit a really big pothole really fast, that is when you really feel a lot of the shock come through the cabin. But in almost every other situation, the car is well controlled. There's a lot of work that went into the suspension systems, and it really shows. Although I would like to point out that the suspension setup on the 3XO is slightly on the stiffer side. It's not the most plush ride in the cabin, but then again, when you have so much power to take care of, you do prefer a slightly stiffer setup. At least I do personally, because that gives you a better sense of control, a better sense of confidence, and as a result, all that power actually becomes a lot more usable. Now, one very interesting thing that I experienced during my short drive of the 3XO is that despite having a lot of power on tap, it just comes in quite high in the RPM band. About 2300, 2400 RPM is when the boost really kicks in. But up until that point, there's really nothing going on. And if you're used to the performance, if you're used to driving fast, and all of a sudden you find yourself in the lower half of the RPM, under the 2000 RPM mark to be specific, you're just left wanting for so much more. Because, like, I've just gone through a rumble strip, I'm at 20 kilometers an hour, I put my foot down, now the boost has come in, and now I can really shoot off into the distance. But it does take a couple of seconds at least for it to build up. The way that I've managed to work around it is that I've shifted the gear lever to manual, so I have manual control over the gearbox. And so say I'm in third, I just shift down to second, keep the engine on the boil, and whenever I want, I have power on tap. So as per my liking, I find that the gearbox is always a gear higher where I would want it to be. Now, this also brings me to another omission, which is the fact that there is no paddle shifter on the car. And given the kind of performance that this is promising, paddle shifters would have been really helpful. All in all, if I have to sum up my experience of the 3XO driving experience, I have to say it's a bit of a mixed bag. I'm not entirely blown away, and maybe it's because I had really high expectations from the car. I really thought that it'll blow my mind away to pieces with 130 horsepower on tap. But I have to say it's not meeting that excitement that I wanted from the car. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with it. Like I said, there are some things in peculiar scenarios which may irk you, but in normal driving conditions, the suspension works just fine. The drivetrain actually is really refined. It's one of the most refined drivetrains, I have to say, especially the gearbox in the segment. You really don't get to know that the gearbox is changing gears. It's really quite refined. And when the engine is on the boil, the car is properly fast and has a stiff driving setup to support your ambitious driving as well. It's just somewhere in the middle, it doesn't connect very well, and I'm left wanting for more. So if you are someone who's planning to get your hands on this car right away, I would highly recommend a test drive first. Well, now it's time to sum up my experience of the XUV 3XO, and for that, allow me to sit down because we need to talk about it. You see, the segment that it competes in has got itself a major update over the last couple of years. I'm talking about the Venue, of course, and also the Kia Sonet recently, and also the Tata Nexon as well. it was only about time that Mahindra upgraded the XUV 300 to modern specifications as well. And speaking of which, this segment has never seen such high safety standards, so much technology on board, and such a long feature list as well. So their work is really cut out. And I believe Mahindra has arrived to the party, but are they late or not? Well, that is still up for an argument. After driving the car, I can safely say that they've covered all the bases that you expect from a car in this segment, and it becomes a really lucrative offer when you factor in the price. At a starting price tag of 7.5 lakh rupees and the top spec model costing 15.5 lakh rupees ex-showroom, 3XO is actually undercutting almost all of its rivals, and that makes it a really sweet deal. The only concern that I have in my mind is the waiting period that is usually associated with new Mahindra cars, and I hope that is not as severe with the 3XO. Having said that, a good price, having covered all the basics, the only question that you really need to ask yourself is, well, whether you like the design of this car or not.